All right, today we're going to dive into a really pivotal moment in early Roman history. It's a time when Rome completely redesigned its society, but not through some big, bloody conquest. Nope, it was through a radical new constitution that basically changed what it meant to be a Roman. It wasn't about who you were anymore, it was all about what you owned.
So, here's the central problem facing ancient Rome. The city was dangerously split. You had the original citizens, the insiders, and then this huge, growing population of newcomers who were living and working there but had absolutely no say in its future. It was a real pressure cooker, just waiting to explode.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit, because you really have to get the tension between these two groups to understand everything that happens next. You could say Rome was basically two cities crammed into one.
So on one side, you had the burgesses. These were the original clans, the OGs, with all the political rights and privileges. And on the other side, you had the Metoici, who you probably know as the plebs. Now this multitude, as it was called, was a mix of, well, pretty much everyone else. You had people from conquered towns, immigrants chasing Rome's success, even freed slaves. They were the engine of the city, but as far as the law was concerned, they were total outsiders.
And this right here really shows you the dangerous imbalance that was brewing. You've got the insiders, the burgesses, who have all the power, but they also have to do all the fighting. And constant war was, thinning their ranks. Meanwhile, you've got the outsiders, the Metoici. They weren't allowed in the army, but their population was booming. And, this is key, so was their wealth. They were getting rich off the victories without having to bleed for them. You can see how this just couldn't last, right? It was totally unsustainable.
Yeah, something had to give. A system this unstable was bound to break. The solution came from this huge set of reforms, named after King Servius Tullius. And it wasn't just a tweak, it was a complete reimagining of the state's relationship with its people.
And there it is. This is the single most important principle that turned Roman society completely on its head. Your duty to the state, fighting in its wars, paying its taxes, wasn't tied to your family name or your bloodline anymore. Nope, it was tied to your property. Simple as that. If you owned a piece of Roman land, you owed service to Rome. Period.
Now this wasn't just some vague idea. It was a highly organized system. They set up the very first land register, the famous Roman census. Every 4 years, every single landowner, whether you were a burgess or a plebeian, had to get your property registered. That data was then used to slot you into a specific property class, which decided exactly what your military duty was and what kind of equipment you had to bring yourself.
So, how did this actually change things on the ground? Well, it created a completely new kind of Roman army. For the very first time, the army wasn't just the old burgesses. It drew from the entire pool of landowners, uniting the insiders and the previously shut-out Metoici into one single fighting force.
The new military was basically a pyramid of property. Right at the top, you had the classes. These were the guys who owned a full hide of land. They formed the heavily armed core of the legion, the hoplites. Then, as you go down the pyramid, men with smaller plots of land filled out the other ranks. They had less equipment, served as light-armed troops. Your wealth literally determined your job and your level of risk on the battlefield.
And this chart just lays it out so clearly. The wealthiest landowners, the guys with a full hide, made up almost half of the entire infantry. They were the absolute backbone of this new army. This whole setup was heavily inspired by Greek military systems, and it created this powerful phalanx, where the richest citizens in the state were literally standing in the front line.
And the result of all this? Whoa! Rome's military potential just exploded. By tapping into the entire population of landowners, the Servian Reform created this combined force of nearly 20,000 men. You had the younger guys, the juniors, for campaigns in the field, and the seniors who stayed back to defend the city walls. All of a sudden, Rome was a real military powerhouse.
Okay, but here's the twist. This new army was built for one thing and one thing only: to win wars. But in creating it, King Servius kicked off this massive, totally unforeseen political chain reaction that would change Rome forever.
I mean, think about it. For the first time ever, you have this huge assembly of property owners, both burgesses and plebeians, all organized together into these military units called centuries. Yeah, they were brought together to fight. But just by getting them all in one place, you accidentally created a brand new center of power in Rome, one that represented wealth and property, not just birthright.
So you can see the dominoes starting to fall, right? It all starts with a military need, but it accidentally puts Rome on the fast track to becoming a republic. Once you have plebeians serving in the army, even becoming officers, you can't just ignore them politically forever. Pretty soon, the king had to get the approval of this new army assembly, the centuries, before he could declare an aggressive war. A power that once belonged only to the old guard now belonged to this new, much bigger group of soldiers.
And really, that's the big takeaway here. The Servian reform is just this incredible reminder of how solving one problem can plant the seeds for a totally different future. In trying to shore up the monarchy and protect its borders, Servius Tullius gave duties to the plebs. But with duty came leverage, and with leverage came power. He set out to forge a new army to save the old Rome, and in doing so, he accidentally laid the foundations for the Roman Republic.